My sister believed her husband over me. My mom, my aunt, even my family friend called me heartless. Then at brunch, I dropped a folder proving he faked everything. My sister just sat there, frozen. They say peace never lasts forever, but I didn't expect mine to get blown apart by a simple text message. My name is Julian Cross. I'm 34 years old, living out at a lakeside cabin in Vermont, taking a much-needed break from the tech world. Life was quiet, predictable, just me, my laptop, and the trees. Until Callum showed up. It started with a text. Callum, hey man, hope you're well. Got a favor to ask? Right away, I felt my stomach tighten. Callum rarely contacted me directly. Usually, any news about him came secondhand through my sister, Meredith. Still, trying to be polite, I answered. Me, hey, what's up? Not 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Callum, his voice all smiles and sunshine. Julian, buddy, listen, he said, dragging out the words like we were old college friends, which we absolutely weren't. I've been under a ton of stress lately. Burnout. Doctors are saying I need to unplug, maybe take some time by the water. Meredith and I were thinking, your cabin. It'd be perfect. I blinked at the wall for a second, making sure I heard right. My cabin. I repeated, buying time. Yeah, just for a few months, you know. Let things cool down for me. Recharge. Plus, it's isolated. Exactly what I need. I gripped the phone tighter. I hated confrontation, but there was no way I could say yes. Callum, I'm actually living here right now. Took a sabbatical and moved everything up. It's my workspace. There was a pause. Just long enough to be awkward. Well, Callum said, with a forced little laugh. I guess I thought you'd be more supportive, considering it's for health reasons. I pressed my thumb into the corner of my desk, feeling the edge dig into my skin. I'm sorry, man, but I really can't. I hope you understand. Silence. Then Callum's voice again, softer, more careful. You know, Meredith's been pretty worried about me. She keeps saying how important family support is during times like this. I stayed quiet. He chuckled, a low, fake-sounding thing. Hate to put it this way, Julian, but if she feels like you're abandoning us, might not be great for her emotionally. Might hurt her. I'd hate to see that happen. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. I knew what he was doing, and it made my skin crawl. I'm sorry, I said again, my voice flat. I can't. He hung up without another word. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. I wanted to believe it was over, that Callum would sulk for a bit, then move on to some other plan. But later that night, a new message popped up, this time from Meredith herself. Meredith, please think about it again, Jules. It's important. For Callum. For us. No details. No real explanation. Just that vague little plea that made me feel like the villain already. I put my phone face down on the table and leaned back in my chair, rubbing my hands over my face. So this was how it was going to be. My quiet, steady little world had just been cracked open, and Callum, with his smooth lies and fake concern, was slipping right inside. The first hint that things were getting worse came 2 days later, when I got a weird text from my mom. Mom, Callum says you're just stressed. Maybe you should talk it out instead of being so harsh. I stared at it, confused. I hadn't even spoken to Mom about any of this. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed again, this time from Aunt Lisa. Aunt Lisa, it's not too late to do the right thing. Family needs to come first, Julian. What the hell was going on? By the weekend, it was clear. Callum had started talking. Whispering, really not to me, not where I could defend myself, but to everyone else. Painting me as the cold-hearted brother who was too selfish to help a man in medical crisis. I heard from a family friend, Greg, who ran into me at the grocery store. Greg clapped me on the back, gave me this pitying look, and said, hope you're able to live with yourself, but sounds like Callum's really struggling. I didn't even have the words to answer. That night, I sat out on the porch, letting the cold air hit my face, trying to figure out how everything had turned sideways so fast. I wasn't the bad guy here. I was just protecting my space, my peace. But somehow, Callum had flipped the story before I even knew the battle had started. By Monday morning, the calls really started. First, Mom again. Mom, Julian, honey, don't be stubborn. If you really cared about Meredith, you'd help Callum. Then Aunt Lisa. Aunt Lisa, he's sick, Julian. Sick. You can't put a workspace above a person's health. Even Uncle Paul chimed in, leaving a voicemail about how family had to stick together during hard times. It was like Callum had handed them all a script, and they were reading it word for word. The only person who didn't pile on was Max, my cousin, the lawyer. Max was blunt, practical, and about as sentimental as a bag of rocks, which was exactly what I needed. He called one evening, while I was knee-deep in trying to ignore another guilt trip email from Mom. Don't cave, Max said the second I picked up. Good evening to you too, I said, half laughing. I'm serious, Julian. Something stinks about this. I looked up Callum's company after I heard the family drama. He's been facing a lot of pressure. Investors getting antsy. Lawsuits floating around. If you hand over your cabin, you're giving him a shield. He'll say he's retreating for his health and try to dodge responsibility. I sat there gripping the phone, feeling a slow horror settle in my gut. He's not trying to heal, Max continued. He's trying to hide. I exhaled a shaky breath. Yeah, that's what it feels like. And if he drags Meredith down with him, Max said, his voice hard, he won't lose a second of sleep over it. Meanwhile, Meredith stayed distant. I texted her a few times, just to check in. Kept it light. Me. Hey, thinking of you. Hope you're okay. Me. Need anything? Talk anytime. The replies came, but they were short. Mechanical. Meredith. We're fine. Thanks. Meredith. Hope you're doing okay too. That was it. No warmth. No usual emojis. No private jokes between us. It was like I was texting a stranger. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I sat on my porch that night, watching the sun bleed down into the trees, and I realized something bitter and true. Callum wasn't just going after me. He was pulling Meredith further into his corner. And if I didn't figure out a way to stop it, I was going to lose her for good. Mom's birthday dinner should have been simple. A quiet gathering at her favorite Italian place in town. Instead, it felt like stepping into enemy territory. The second I walked into the restaurant, I could feel it, the stiffness in the air, the sideways glances. My stomach tightened, but I forced a smile and headed toward the table where the whole family was already gathered. Callum was there, of course. Front and center, charming the room like he was running for office. He stood up when he saw me, flashing that too-perfect grin. Julian, glad you could make it, he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. We weren't sure you'd show, considering how busy you've been lately. There it was. The first jab, wrapped in a layer of fake concern. I pulled out a chair at the end of the table, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Meredith sat next to Callum, her face neutral, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Dinner started out stiff, with everyone tiptoeing around the tension. Mom tried to keep it light, asking about work, about the weather, about anything but the elephant in the room. But Callum couldn't leave it alone. He waited until the plates were cleared and the waiter brought the birthday cake before leaning back in his chair and sighing dramatically. You know, he said, swirling his wine glass, some people just don't understand what it means to sacrifice for family. Silence. Everyone knew who he meant. Not everyone, Aunt Lisa said quickly, shooting a pointed look at me. Some of us understand. I clenched my hands under the table. I mean, Callum continued, voice smooth as silk, some people just like being difficult. Always have been. Makes it hard to build anything real, you know? A few people chuckled awkwardly. I caught Uncle Paul muttering something to my dad, something about how it was just Julian being Julian. I didn't say anything. I sat there, swallowing every bitter word rising in my throat. Meredith didn't defend me. She didn't even look at me. The room shifted around me, like I was shrinking and everything else was getting farther away. When the cake came out and everyone sang, I clapped and smiled like nothing was wrong. Like I didn't notice the wall being built between me and the people who were supposed to be my family. After dinner, I lingered by the door, debating whether to just leave without a scene. That's when I overheard it. Greg, the same family friend from the grocery store, talking to his wife near the coat rack. I still can't believe Julian would be so heartless, he said, shaking his head. Per Meredith. His wife sighed, tucking her purse under her arm. You think you know someone? They turned and left without noticing me standing there. I walked out into the cold night, shoving my hands deep into my jacket pockets. My breath came out in short, white puffs. Inside me, something was starting to boil. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was injustice. And it was getting harder and harder to keep it bottled up. It had been a couple of weeks since Mom's birthday dinner, and things hadn't gotten any better. Family group texts started excluding me. Invites to little get-togethers stopped coming. Most nights, I just stayed at the cabin, trying not to think about it, telling myself it didn't matter. But it did. Then, out of the blue, I got a message from Sophia. Sophia Klein, a tech journalist I used to work with back in my coding days, one of the few people I still trusted. Sophia, hey, heard some weird things about Callum. You got a minute? I called her immediately. Jules, she said, cutting straight to the point like always. Be careful. Callum's name's been bouncing around in tech circles. And not in a good way. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? He's blaming health issues for his company's downturn, sure. But insiders are whispering it's about bad investments. Stupid risks. Blowing through cash he didn't have. His startup's practically a house of cards at this point. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. Part of me had already suspected it, but hearing it laid out so plainly still hit hard. You think he's lying about the burnout thing? I asked. Sophia hesitated. I think he's milking it. Sympathy is easier to sell than incompetence. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, turning it over and over in my head. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe Sophia was wrong. Maybe. Then Max called. Got something for you, he said. Legal filings. Public record. Callum transferred company assets to shell accounts last month, 2 weeks before he claimed burnout. Looks like he's insulating himself before everything crashes. I didn't even realize I was standing until I heard the creak of the wooden floor beneath me. You're sure? I asked. I'm a lawyer, Max said dryly. I'm not guessing. Everything clicked into place. The sudden desperate need for my cabin. The emotional blackmail. The whisper campaigns. Callum wasn't just trying to hide from stress. He was trying to disappear. And he didn't mind torching my reputation or Meredith's life. In the process, I made up my mind right then. No more waiting. No more hoping it would blow over. I was going to find the truth. Whatever it took. Max gave me the name of a private investigator he trusted, Alice Riley. She wasn't cheap. But after everything Callum had put me through, I didn't care. I called her that same afternoon. Alice answered on the second ring, her voice brisk and no nonsense. Riley Investigations. I introduced myself, explained the situation without sugarcoating it. She didn't laugh. She didn't act surprised. Instead, she just said, sounds like a classic fraud and sympathy play. I'll take the case. 3 days later, she showed up at the cabin. Late 30s, leather jacket, sharp green eyes that didn't miss a thing. I'll be discreet, she promised, pulling out a small notebook. But Callum's already left a trail. Guys like him always do. Over the next week, Alice dug into everything. His business records, public filings, social media, even health claims he'd made to the family. And what she found made my stomach turn. For starters, there was no medical record. No doctor visits logged. No diagnosis. No leave of absence papers from his company. His so-called burnout wasn't official. It was just a story he'd crafted and sold to everyone who cared enough to listen. And while he claimed to be too sick to work, Alice had photos, crystal clear ones, of Callum hitting the gym 5 days a week. Not just light workouts either. Heavy lifting, boxing classes, full-on cardio. She showed me a series of time-stamped pictures on her tablet. Callum laughing with his personal trainer, flexing in a mirror, flirting with a woman at a juice bar. He didn't look burned out. He looked like a guy living his best life while everyone else worried themselves sick. But it wasn't just the health lie. Alice found court documents showing Callum's startup had been bleeding money for months before he ever mentioned burnout. Mismanaged funds, bad investments in junk tech, shady loans he never paid back. His whole retreat story was a way to duck investors, dodge lawsuits, and avoid responsibility until he could figure out his next move. And the worst part? Alice tracked down several messages, private ones, between Callum and a few of his old college buddies, bragging about how easy it was to turn Meredith against Julian. How he'd made me out to be selfish and arrogant, just to isolate me. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my mouth dry. He hadn't just lied about being sick. He had intentionally poisoned my relationship with my sister, just because it made things easier for him. Alice slid a manila folder across the table. This is just the preliminary stuff, she said. If you want, I can dig deeper. I guarantee there's more. I ran a hand over my face, feeling the weight of it all settle on my shoulders. No, I said after a minute. This is enough. Enough to know I wasn't crazy. Enough to know Callum was worse than I thought. And enough to start planning what came next. Because I wasn't just going to defend myself anymore. I was going to expose him. Planning the confrontation felt a little like getting ready for war. Max was the first person I called after Alice handed me the report. We do this smart, he said, voice low. No yelling. No drama. Just facts. Hit him so hard with the truth he can't spin it. We decided on a brunch. Neutral ground. Casual, but official enough that people couldn't just brush it off. I sent the invites myself, a simple group message to the family. Me, brunch at the cabin. Want to clear the air. Important everyone's there. Within minutes, the responses rolled in. Mom, finally. So proud of you, honey. Family first. Aunt Lisa, see you there. Callum, looking forward to it, bro. That one made me snort out loud. He had no idea. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Max helped me organize Alice's findings into a clean, airtight presentation. Emails, photos, court documents, screenshots, all time-stamped, all undeniable. We printed everything twice, once for me to present, and once for anyone who wanted to take a copy home. I rehearsed what I was going to say, pacing the living room until the boards creaked under my feet. I kept it simple in my head. State the facts. Show the evidence. Let the truth land on its own. No emotion. No begging for understanding. If they believed me, good. If they didn't, that was on them. The night before the brunch, I barely slept. Kept waking up in a cold sweat, imagining 100 ways it could go wrong. But by morning, a weird calm settled over me. This was my shot. Maybe my only one. And I was ready to take it. I set up everything outside. Long tables under the trees, plates, coffee pots, fruit platters, made it look normal, relaxed, like a real family event. Callum and Meredith pulled up first. I watched them from the porch, Callum strutting up the steps, sunglasses on, casual as anything. Meredith trailing a few steps behind, looking small and tired. "Big day," Callum said, slapping me on the back like we were old friends. "Glad you finally came to your senses, man." I just smiled thinly and led them inside. The rest of the family trickled in after: Mom, Dad, Aunt Lisa, Uncle Paul, even Greg the family friend. Everyone buzzing, laughing, happy, thinking this was going to be some sweet, tearful reconciliation. I looked around the room one last time, heart pounding, fists unclenching at my sides. They were all here. Perfect. Time to turn the lights on. The first few minutes of brunch were a blur of small talk. I poured coffee, passed out plates of scrambled eggs and toast, smiled when people made jokes. Meanwhile, the folders sat under my arm like a live grenade. Finally, when everyone had eaten enough to relax, I stood up. "Thanks for coming," I said, clearing my throat. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I wanted to get everyone together because there's been a lot of misunderstanding. A few people nodded. Mom dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, beaming like she thought a big group hug was coming. Callum leaned back in his chair, arm slung casually around Meredith's shoulders, his sunglasses pushed up into his hair. "No hard feelings, man," he said with a lazy grin. "It's good you realized family comes first." I smiled, wide, cold, and pulled the folder from under my arm. "Yeah," I said. "Family does come first. That's why you deserve the truth." I handed out copies of the report down both sides of the table. People flipped them open, murmuring in confusion as they scanned the first few pages. Callum frowned. "What's all this?" I clicked the little speaker I'd hidden behind the centerpiece and played the first audio clip. Callum's voice crackled to life, unmistakable, cocky. "It's easy, man. Just spin the health thing, get everyone feeling bad. Sympathy buys you time. You just gotta have one scapegoat, someone stubborn enough to take the blame." The table went dead silent. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Meredith's hands froze on the edge of her chair. Callum's face twisted, a flash of panic before he smoothed it over with a fake laugh. "That's out of context," he said, waving a hand. "Joking around. Come on, Jules." I flipped to the next page in the packet. Gym check-ins. Full body photos of Callum lifting weights and partying at bars on the exact dates he claimed he was too sick to work. Then business records showing the asset transfers Max had found. The fake shell companies. The money hidden. The investors he had quietly abandoned. "This is ridiculous," Callum said, voice louder now. "You hacked me or something. This is illegal." "No hacking," I said calmly. "Everything here is public record. Or sent by people you trusted." Callum stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden deck. "This is character assassination," he barked. "Julian's twisting everything." "Really?" Max said from his spot near the coffee. "Because we also have signed affidavits from people you burned. Investors. Partners." Callum looked around the table, desperate now, searching for an ally. But the faces staring back at him weren't buying it anymore. Even Mom, who had defended him so fiercely, looked pale and stunned, clutching the packet in trembling hands. Meredith just sat there, her eyes wide and glassy. "You're all fools," Callum spat, his voice cracking. "Fools. You'll regret this." He shoved past the table, knocking over a glass of orange juice, and stormed toward the driveway. Nobody chased him. Nobody even moved. The only sound was the quiet breeze shifting the trees. I stood there for a long moment, chest heaving, heart hammering behind my ribs, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak. Finally, Meredith looked up at me. Her voice was small, shaky. I didn't know," she whispered. "Julian." "I didn't know." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. The truth was out now. The lie had shattered. And even if it couldn't erase the pain, at least, finally, they saw it too. The day after the brunch, my phone started buzzing at dawn. First Meredith, then Mom, then even Aunt Lisa. I didn't answer any of them right away. I needed space, time to figure out what forgiveness even meant after everything that had happened. By mid-morning, there was a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find Meredith standing there, eyes red and puffy, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold the pieces together. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice small. I stepped aside, and she walked in slowly, looking around the cabin like it was the first time she was really seeing it. "I'm so sorry, Julian," she said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "God, I'm so sorry." I stayed quiet, letting her get it out. I thought you were just being stubborn. I thought Callum was." She shook her head, wiping at her eyes. "I let him twist everything. I didn't even question it." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time in months, she looked like my real sister again. The one who used to sneak candy into my backpack for late nights coding. The one who cheered the loudest when I got my first promotion. "I get it," I said finally. You trusted him. You wanted it to be real. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I moved out, she blurted, almost too fast to follow. Last night, packed a bag and went back to Mom's. I'm staying there until I can figure things out. I just nodded again. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound either too cold or too broken. I want to fix things with you, she said, leaning forward. Whatever it takes, I'll do the work. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. Later that afternoon, Max swung by with pizza and a six-pack, like nothing unusual had happened. You nuked him, he said casually, dropping the box on the table. Nice work. I laughed, a real, exhausted, almost hysterical laugh. By evening, the apology texts started coming in from the rest of the family. Mom sent a long, rambling message about how proud she was of me for standing up for the truth. Aunt Lisa added a simple, I'm sorry for doubting you. And even Greg texted an awkward, guess I owe you a drink. The biggest surprise came from my aunt, the same one who had been Callum's loudest supporter. She emailed me a full-on letter, apologizing for letting herself be manipulated, promising to do better. It didn't erase the months of betrayal, but it mattered. Meanwhile, Callum's public apology, if you could even call it that, popped up online 2 days later. A half-hearted statement on his company's page blaming mental health struggles for his poor judgment. Nobody bought it. Investors pulled out. His startup folded within a month. Max even started working on a potential defamation case, just in case Callum tried to crawl back and start throwing blame again. But for now, it was quiet. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without waiting for the next knife to hit my back. And more importantly, I had my sister back. It's strange how fast life can go back to feeling normal after a storm blows through. A few months after the confrontation, the cabin was quiet again. No endless texts. No guilt-tripping phone calls. Just me, the lake, and the sound of the wind in the trees. Work had picked up too. I finally felt ready to dive back into projects I'd abandoned during the chaos, small freelance gigs at first, then bigger ones. For the first time in a long time, I looked at my calendar and didn't feel dread sinking into my gut. I even started writing. Not code, actual words. Late at night, I sat by the fireplace with my laptop and tapped out a draft of a story. Something about family manipulation, about being made the villain in someone else's fairy tale. About how hard it is to fight when you're standing alone, but how worth it is to stay standing. I didn't know if I'd ever publish it. Didn't really matter. Just writing it down made it real. Made me real again. Meanwhile, Meredith started therapy. She took it seriously, not the half-hearted kind of working on myself you see on social media. Real therapy. Real work. Some weekends, she'd drive out to the cabin, and we'd sit on the porch, drinking bad coffee and talking about everything we used to be afraid to say. Sometimes there were tears. Sometimes there was just silence. But every time, when she left, I felt a little more whole. The rest of the family slowly fell back into place too. There were still scars, things you can't unhear, apologies you can't force, but at least now, nobody was pretending anymore. And that, honestly, was enough. As for Callum, he'd disappeared. Rumor had it he fled overseas somewhere, trying to start a new business under a different name. I didn't bother to track him down. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need the satisfaction of seeing him fail. The truth had already done its work. It always does, if you're patient enough to let it. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit outside under the stars, listening to the water lap against the dock, and think about everything that had happened. There was no bitterness left in me. Only clarity. I knew now how easy it is to be made a villain when someone needs a scapegoat. I knew how strong you have to be to hold the line alone, when everyone else is begging you to fold. But most of all, I knew the truth. And that was enough. It always would be.